Hey everyone, long time no see. Wooden Railway Edward here, and it has been a very long while since I've made a video for this channel. And that is due to a myriad of reasons. As you all know, life often gets in the way, and I haven't had the amount of free time I'd want to dedicate to this channel. But hopefully now, during the summer months, I'll have a little bit more flexibility with my schedule, and I can work on posting new videos. And in that little bit of time off, I've thought of many new video concepts and ideas and directions that I want to take the channel. So hopefully this video will be a little bit of an example of what you can expect from my channel. Also, without further ado, I'd like to thank you all for 1,000 subscribers. These last couple weeks I've been checking my channel daily and seeing that subscriber count tick up ever so slightly every day. And finally, I've reached the milestone. And this has been 5 years in the making. And I just can't thank the audience, you all, enough for getting me to 1,000 subscribers. It hasn't felt like 5 years, but it has been a long journey. But it has been a very rewarding and fun journey for me, as I've made so many new friends and interacted with my subscribers. And I'm just so flattered that you guys continue to come back to my channel and subscribe to my channel, showing that you want to see more videos from me. And once again, I just can't thank you enough. It's such a great milestone. And currently I'm thinking of some kind of video idea or something like that I can put together, and maybe something like a contest. I'm not really sure yet what I want to do for a 1,000 subscribers thank you video, but hopefully something like that will be coming down the pipeline soon, and I have a lot of time to think about something like that. And in September, I'm actually coming up on my 6th year anniversary. So maybe it can be in conjunction with that, a little bit of a milestone video. So, as you can see in front of you, here is a Thomas, and it is not a wooden railway Thomas, and that is because this video is an amalgamation of many different items that I've purchased over the last couple of months, and I've branched out from Thomas Wooden Railway, at least in the purchasing sense, and especially in the locations where I have bought these items. And I thought it would be interesting to showcase some of these items that I have gotten. And I think they're really interesting and not really something you've seen on my channel or would expect me to collect. And even in my opinion, I wouldn't really see myself collecting these things, but I found them for a great price, so I thought I'd showcase them to you. And I think it will be pretty interesting for us to look at these items. So why don't we focus on this item first? And before we do that, I'll just give you a little bit of a backstory on what these items are. And most of the items you'll see in this video are actually from Flea Market. So I've gone to thrift stores before, and of course I've shopped online on eBay and other online retailers, but I've never really gone to a flea market. And I've always seen different YouTubers, not even just in the Thomas and Friends realm, but just a lot of different people online shop at flea markets and places like that where they sell secondhand things. And I've always been very envious of those people who find great deals on items that I personally would really enjoy. And I really like the idea of the thrill of the hunt and finding all these different items at places where you might not expect to find them, such as finding maybe a rare Thomas Wooden Railway item at a booth where a seller might not know what they're giving away. And there hasn't really ever been flea markets in my area. I never went to one. However, just a couple weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, I, on a whim, decided to take a trip, and I was driving around to different places in my area, different stores, and it wasn't on my itinerary for the day, but I happened to find a flea market, and it was actually a group of flea markets. It was a whole complex of buildings where there was people selling things. And that weekend I went on Saturday, and then the next day I went back, and it was just amazing the amount of stuff I found there. There was many different vendors, and there was even a whole section that had model trains. And the whole experience just really blew me away, that I wasn't even planning on going to this establishment, but it just happened to be in the vicinity of other stores that I was going to, and I didn't even know that this place existed. So it really was a great day for me, and it really was sort of a dream coming true, as I've always wanted and dreamed of going to flea markets and finding deals on any type of Thomas and Friends merchandise. And that day I fulfilled that desire because I found a lot of different things train related and Thomas and Friends related, and this is one of them in front of you. So this came in a lot that I got, and it was actually the first thing that I purchased, and this lot cost me about $25. The seller who was there wasn't present, I should say. They weren't there, they weren't present, but there was a different seller who actually texted the guy selling the stuff, and I was able to bargain a price. And although this might seem a little bit pricey for what I got, usually I'm very frugal with my money, but I was very dedicated to buying this merchandise that I found. So I'm glad with the amount I spent, and I'm not really concerned about it. So here is a pullback Thomas, and I've never really seen something like this before. And let me just quickly check what year it was made. It says 1989, so this is fairly old. And if you really think about it, that was more than 30 years ago. So this is a very old piece of merchandise, and for its age, the condition is not terrible. It is not in the best condition, as you can see. His side rod is completely missing here, and on the other side, his side rod is beginning to be cracked. But the stickers on him are mostly intact, except for this part up here. It's starting to peel off. And I think that's just a really classic Thomas face. And I really enjoy these old merchandise pieces that really emanate the classic Thomas era, especially seasons 2, 3, 4. And that is why I really like merchandise such as this. And I've never really had it before, so it's very enticing that I have it now. And I think I said it was a pullback Thomas. I actually think it's more of a battery-powered Thomas, as I've never really noticed this before, but there's a battery compartment back here. And of course, there's no battery here. The door that probably covered this battery compartment is off. He has a sticker with coal in his bunker right here. And he does have the detail of a driver and fireman in his cab. He is a little bit dirty. I'll work on cleaning him up in the coming days. I have a lot of free time, as I said, so I can work on that. And also, I think I have to dust some of my engines. As you'll see, I'll be bringing in some Thomas and Wood and Railway for comparisons, and they are very dusty and dirty, as in the last couple months, I have not had time to clean or maintain the cleanliness of any of my engines. So that will be a fair bit of time that I'll have to dedicate to that. On his buffers right here, they are not painted, but I do like how his running plate is molded and how it curves down like that. And besides that, I don't know if there's really that much else to say about this Thomas. He doesn't have any eyebrows, but as I once said, his face is very classic, and that's very reminiscent of those seasons. He has nice stickered on detailing right here. He has number 1 right there, and just the smart red lining. And besides that, there's not much to say. He is mostly made of plastic, which is very unique for this time, as most of the items were either made in wood or die cast, either being Thomas Wood Railway or ERTL respectively. But I think this is a nice change of pace for my collection and something different that I can display. So we'll put them off to the side right there, and let's take a look at some ERTL items. Yes, that's right. The only ERTL item I've had previously is ERTL 16, but now I have a couple more friends that I can add to my collection. Here is an ERTL Herald, and as you can see, he is also pretty beat up. He doesn't have his propellers anymore. They have broken off. He does have this one on the back, though it looks like a dog chewed it, which is kind of interesting. He is made almost completely of die cast except for those little plastic bits. And he does have a fair amount of paint chipping on his model, although you can still see his face, and I think that's a very cute Herald face. And let's see, what else? On his bottom right here, you'll notice with a lot of these ERTL engines, there's a little bit of pink right here, pink marker or paint. I'm not really sure what that denotes, but that's an interesting thing to point out. Let's see, what year is he? He is 1991. On his body right here, he does have some molded die cast details. You can feel the indents of his cab, but he also has this nice painted on detailing, which is this stripe right here and Herald, his nameplate, I guess you could say, or just name printed on to his side. So besides that, I'm not really sure there's anything else to say about Herald. So let's take a look at George. And George is different from other ERTL models, as he is made of plastic, about 50-50, I'd say, with the metal. So his roof part right here is plastic. And an interesting thing is that on his roof right here, his roof is green, but then there's a green sticker. And it's not exactly the same color of green, so I'm not really sure why they did that. It doesn't really make sense, and I feel like it's just kind of a waste, but, you know, it must have had some kind of purpose. In his back compartment here, he has a little bunker where there's some coal, and I guess it's a suggestion of where a driver could stand. George's face is very, very small. If the camera would focus, thank you, you can see how small his face is. And besides that, there's not really that much more to say about George. I do like how his body is very thin, and he does look very proportionate compared to some other models that we'll be looking at shortly that are not very proportionate and do not have the best of proportions in comparison to other models in the range. Let's see what date he is. So it's on the top of his roof right here, and I can't really make out what year he was made. But I'm assuming it's probably around the same time. Let's see, Season 4 was released in early 90s, so his model was probably made around then too. So let's look at another model, and let's look at City of Truro. And this is a very elegant model, and I'm glad that it's actually in the best condition out of any of these ERTL models, and the reason being is because he is an engine who was never made in Thomas Wood and Railway, and I don't believe he was made in any other merchandise ranges for Thomas & Friends. So it's very interesting to get a model like him in this range. And I think, honestly, his proportions are very good for ERTL standards. And that was not meant to be a jab. I just don't think that ERTL is really all it's cracked up to be. I enjoy ERTL, of course, but I don't think it's one of the better merchandise ranges that has been produced. Nostalgic, of course, but not necessarily good by any means. So as you can see here, he has nice red detailing, and his side rods are picked out in a silver color. On his bottom here, he actually doesn't have the pink mark, so maybe he's different from the other engines. And let's see, what year does he say? His is 1993, so he's a little bit later than the other models. On his front, obviously, on his smoke box, he doesn't have a face, as he didn't have a face in the television series. And his buffers are detailed black there, and his couplings, he has the standard ERTL couplings, which, once again, are not very efficient, and I don't really think that they're all that well engineered. However, another hallmark of ERTL is that the tender is connected to the main body of the engine. As with all the other tender engines, he is the same, and his tender has some molded coal, and he has some nice detailing. Unfortunately, his nameplate above one of the wheel arches right here is scratched out. The sticker is peeled off, so that's unfortunate, and it's the same on the other side too. So I guess that just said his name on there, and it would have been nice to have, as not really any other parts of his model are all that damaged. However, you know, it's still nice to have a model like this, and I am glad that he was included in the lot. Because if I got someone like Thomas, that would be good, but everyone has Thomas. There's a million different versions of Thomas, but a unique engine like that is very interesting to have. Let's next take a look at our green friend Percy, and if you thought this model was well proportioned, this is not. And this Percy actually reminds me a fair bit of the 2003 redesign of Thomas Wood and Railway Percy, and that Percy has always had interesting dimensions, and he just looks pretty fat. And this Percy is no different. If you can see, his boiler is even larger than this Thomas Wood and Railway Percy, and his smoke box and face stick out above his running plate, the front of his buffers right there, and I just think he looks very chunky and unpleasant, if I could phrase it like that. He does have the pink on the bottom of him, and let's see, what year does he say? His model says 1989, so he doesn't have a paper face, but I think he's one of the earlier ERTL years. I'm not really sure when ERTL, probably 1985 is when I'm guessing ERTL was released in conjunction with the television series. but don't quote me on that. Once again, I'm not an ERTL expert. I don't even claim to be a Thomas Wooden Railway expert. I just like looking at the models. But most of his model is made in die cast, and it's cold to the touch, and that's a really nice change of pace compared to the plasticky models of Mattel years. And of course now they're not even really making merchandise, so I shouldn't really complain about this guy, as at least they were dedicated to making merchandise as nice as this back then. His bunker has some molded coal, and I do like the detailing of the grates on the side and how it juts out a little bit. That's accurate to Percy in the television series. He does have a printed number 6, and like most of the ERTL models who are at least tank engines, he does have an interior cab. There's no detailing, but you could have the suggestion of a driver and fireman in there, which is always very nice. His wheels, he has not necessarily a working side rods, but just a plastic rod that is connected through his bogie, which just sort of suggests side rods there. And I guess it's not really a bogie, more of his chassis, I should say. So there's Percy, and let's take a look at another road vehicle. And here's Trevor. And if you thought George was small, look how small Trevor is. He's so cute, and I really enjoy Trevor. Look how small his face is, for one. And I think Trevor's smile on his model is just a very cute smile right there. And you can see his face is round, and it's just very small. And he is a little bit different than other depictions of Trevor in merchandise and other Thomas & Friends ranges. For example, he has these red wheels right here. Of course, in Thomas Wooden Railway, at least in the earlier model, his wheels were in black. So that's a difference from that model. However, besides that, his color is obviously the same, and he does have molded coal, and his smokestack is pretty large. And once again, there's a suggestion of somewhere where a driver could sit. And overall, I think this is a very compact, yet elegant model of Trevor, and I think it's a very practical and accurate model of Trevor. He does have some dirt, such as this Thomas over here, which I'll try to clean up, although I do like how these models are beaten up, as that shows that they've been loved and hopefully appreciated and played with by a child, which is always the main target of these models. Of course, it's nice to have them displayed on a shelf, but at the end of the day, they are toys. So to see that some child 30 years ago enjoyed playing with these models, it's definitely heartwarming and really demonstrates the purpose of models such as these, and quality models, I should put it that, as I don't know how many children are playing with the plasticky crap that Mattel is producing these days. However, side tangent aside, here is the last engine we'll take a look at least not in the box, hint hint, and here is Donald. And once again, his tender is connected to his main body, and he does have the same thing with Percy, as his side rods are just sort of this structure right here on his chassis. He does have the pink once again, and let me see what year he was made. 1992. So the years are kind of all over the place, so maybe that demonstrates this kid was interested in Thomas & Friends for a fair couple of years. An interesting note is that his couplings are actually metal, which is different from these other models of ERTLs. So I guess it depends on what the model was and how these couplings would be made. I'm not sure what other engines had metal couplers, but he does have it picked out in red right here, his buffer beam, and he does have his nameplate Donald, and let's see, it's on the other side. Yep, it's on the other side. And he is actually in pretty good condition, except for his dome and funnel right there. They're a little bit chipped off, but that makes sense for his model. He has a little bit of dirt in his tender once again with his molded coal, which I'll try to get out to the best of my ability, although once again, as I added, it does add something to these models. He has an open cab, and it has a fair amount of space there. I'm sure you could put something like a model railway figurine, as people have a lot of those, in his cab, and that would look pretty realistic. And overall, I think the proportions of Donald are very nice. He is, of course, missing his Scottish twin, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I am happy that I got a diverse range of ERTL models, as these are all very different models, and it's actually pretty ironic how that happened, that they are almost as much diverse as you can get for ERTL models. You've got tender engines, engines with faces, and those without. You've got small models, you've got a helicopter, a tank engine, and a steamroller. And also, you actually have figurines. Here are some ERTL figurines that came in this lot that I got at the flea market, and they were included in the lot, and I think they're actually pretty cool. They do have a fair amount of paint that has been chipped off of their models. However, I think that the representation of them is still there, and it is very nice to have these models. Even though I might not use them for a series or a remake, they are models that are nice to have as collector's pieces. I can't really see... Oh, actually I do. It's 1990 is Sir Topham Hatt, and I am assuming this guard or conductor is the same. 1990, yes. So I'm not sure if they made any other figurines of these ERTL models, but if they did, that would be cool to have those, although I am happy to have these. I think it's interesting, the contrast between these models. Of course, Sir Topham Hatt is stout and round, while the guard or whatever you driver, I'm not really sure what you want to call him, he is very skinny and he has very long legs. So I think these cartoonish depictions of these classic characters are very funny, and I think that they are very good representations. Of course, Sir Topham Hatt has his overcoat with his yellow dress shirt or vest, I guess. He has a yellow vest and a white dress shirt and tie. And this guard has the standard blue outfit that most of the other workers on Sodor have. And besides that, that is actually the end of this ERTL lot. But this is only a fraction of what I purchased that day and the next day, actually, at that flea market. And I thought this would be a good starting point, as these are pretty universally interesting models. They are ERTL and they are very well known. Some more obscure stuff will be coming up later, but I thought this would be a nice hook to this video, and this is what you can expect, finding different things, not necessarily Thomas Edwin Railway, but I was able to find these different models. So let's take a look now at more ERTL, actually. We're not entirely done with the ERTL, but as I hinted at earlier, this ERTL is actually new in the box, which is very interesting and something I've not had before. So let's first take a look at this model, which is ERTL Harold. Now, I'm not one to usually collect new in-box items. However, I was able to get these models for $5 each, and only spending $15 on 3 of these new in-box ERTL items I thought was a pretty good deal at the time. And looking back on eBay, I think it was a good steal. They're a couple bucks less than what they'd be on eBay, what I paid for them at least. And I think they're just honestly a really great conversation starter for items to put on a shelf, as they have a unique type of packaging, and it's just something more interesting to look at than just the standard Thomas Edwin Railway boxes that I already have displayed on my shelf, which contains most of my Thomas Edwin Railway and other Thomas and Friends merchandise. So on the back here, it has a little character card, and actually these are not as bad as the Thomas Edwin Railway ones. It says, Harold the helicopter. When Harold makes his noisy appearance, an atmosphere of excitement fills the air. I think that's a very eloquent and on-point description of Harold. Collect all the Thomas the Tank Engine toys and collector cards too. I really like the sense that this was a collector item or a collectible. You know, it made it more interesting. Of course, he is labeled 17 right there. It just made it more interesting to collect these items, and that's definitely partly why I am so interested in Thomas and Friends. I really enjoy the hunt of collecting new items and displaying them, sort of like a museum. I've always been interested in displays and types of things like that, and having a merchandise range or even merchandise ranges under the Thomas and Friends banner to collect is definitely a very interesting hobby for me to have, and of course, they were trying to promote it to many other people as well. Let's see, what date does he have? He is dated 1992. So, for comparison, we bring in this more jaded and beat-up Harold. So the comparison would be, this is a very bright-eyed and gung-ho Harold over here. This guy looks like he's been through a little bit, maybe a couple world wars, and he is definitely worse for the wear. He's seen better days, and I think that's a very interesting comparison between these two models. One that has never been opened, and has just been admired on a shelf, where this Herald has been beaten up a little bit and played with, which there is nothing wrong with that. And as I said, I often prefer these models as they tell a little bit of a story, as opposed to a more sterile depiction of this merchandise still in the package right here. And it is a little sad. I wonder why this Herald was never opened, although there must be some type of reason. And there was a couple more Heralds and of the other items also that I'll showcase in a minute on the display rack where I purchased these items from the seller, and I assume it must have been overstock from a store that closed or something like that. Maybe someone we in modern day might consider a scalper put these items away to sell at a higher rate later on, as many people do that today with stuff that they purchase. However, regardless, it's still nice to have this Herald new in the box. So there's not really that much to talk about, although I do like the packaging design, how it has the rolling hills of Shining Time, and of course the Shining Time labeling, ages 3 and up, it says in the left-hand corner, and of course die-cast metal, the hallmark of ERTL. It does have the classic Thomas and Friends logo on the bottom here. It is a little bit dark in my studio right now, but hopefully you can see that on the bottom corner. And as I said, he is labeled 17, so I'm not sure in relation to other models how old or new he is. However, it is interesting how he is packaged, I guess you could say vertically as opposed to horizontally. I guess that's a little bit more ecologically friendly, using a little bit less plastic and space on the shelf. So we'll put Herald to the side there, and let's look at another item. Let's look at Henrietta. And Henrietta is different from other ERTL items in that she is not necessarily die-cast metal, as the package states there. Just feeling from inside the packaging right here, and of course just using the eye test, she is mostly plastic. And she is a fair amount lighter than the other ERTL items. Even someone like Herald right here, who is much more hefty, she is much lighter. And on the bottom right here, let me just look at what her date is, 1992, so the same as Herald. She has her name right here. I should have mentioned that in red lettering, as Herald does. And let's see, what are the passengers doing in her windows right there? Let's see if I can get a better angle at that. So, looks like one is smoking a pipe, so that is similar to the birdie, the old Thomas Wooden Railway birdie. I wonder if that would have stirred up controversy if that was on a Thomas Wooden Railway Henrietta. I'm sure people wouldn't like that. There is the ERTL logo I failed to mention on the Herald. That's a nice logo. And I believe ERTL is a English company, a company from the UK. So I'm not sure. Let's see. Does it say Iowa? Maybe that was the ERTL company in the US. That was their headquarters. Let's see what her character card says. It says, as Toby's dedicated coach, Henrietta has found contentment with her life on the island. She is labeled number 18. So let's see. Herald was 17. Okay, so she's 18. So around the same time period. It does say cut on the dotted line right there. So I guess you could cut out this character card and display it. And besides that, there's not really that much more to say about Henrietta. As I said, most of her model is plastic. Although, interestingly, like Donald, her couplings appear to be metal, which is a change of pace from some other ERTL items. But besides that, she has really nice detailing, and I think she's one of the best representations, at least in merchandise, of Henrietta that I've come across. As her Thomas Wooden Railway model is pretty bare bones in comparison to some other Thomas Wooden Railway models that have a little bit more detail. Hopefully that provides a little bit more light. I changed up the lighting a little bit. And here's a very interesting package. It is Diesel, the devious, I guess you could say, diesel engine. And on the side right here, here's a little triangular advertisement, I guess you could say. And it says, exclusive offer, introducing Oliver, the GWR engine. See back for details. And once again, I really enjoy how these items were all sort of melded together in the idea of a range, collect the range. And I really like how they dedicated these times to even making illustrations like that. That's a very enticing illustration of Oliver and very accurate, and I really like that. Here is Diesel, and it is actually very rare to see his nose without a chip of paint on it, so it's nice to have him new in the box. And once again, I paid $5 for all these engines. Let's see, on the back here, I'm assuming 1992. Yep, 1992, and he is labeled 16. So I guess it goes 16, 17, 18 for these items. I went out of order, but, I luck of the draw. His illustration right here is very nice. I wonder if this was taken out of some type of magazine or something like that. When there's trouble brewing, devious diesel, as referred to by the other engines, is sure to be in the thick of it. Once again, a very eloquent and honest description of diesel. Interestingly, it says made in China. So these items were actually made in China, and I guess that's common for these engines. I was assuming maybe they'd be made in the UK or maybe somewhere like Thailand, as if you notice, such as Matchbox cars, they were made in the UK for a long time, especially in the 70s and 80s, and then eventually the production moved to Asia. Let's look at the advertisement right here. It says, receive die-cast all over the GWR engine, exclusively through this offer. So I guess you mail to the ERTL company, although this says Kalamazoo, Michigan, right, or Michigan, Minnesota. Who knows? I'm not a state expert. But that's kind of interesting because it says the headquarters are in Iowa right here, so not really sure. But let's see, what else does it say? Purchase 3 ERTL Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends products, as seen on PBS series Shining Time Station, between 1993 and 1994. Gold Rail series not applicable. So that's very interesting because we're actually going to be looking at a Gold Rail item very shortly. So I didn't actually notice that before filming this video. Do not send cash. Include $150 check. That's very interesting. So I guess you could have gotten free Oliver. Delivery 6 to 8 weeks. Imagine that in the time where Amazon did not exist, or at least in its infancy as a book retailer online. There was a 6 to 8 week wait, 2-month wait. I assure you that many people today would be very upset with a wait time such as that. But I think that's enough said on these items. I am very glad to have these items in my collection, and they are going to be great display pieces for my shelf. I do not really intend to take these out of the packaging. At that flea market, I haven't been back since, unfortunately, as I've gotten very busy. However, there were some engines left over, only these engines. There wasn't any other characters, but maybe I can go back, and if they're still there, I can get a couple more of these and maybe take one out of the packaging and just have another ERTL item actually mint condition, such as Diesel. I'm thinking I'd probably take out Diesel, maybe Henrietta. I already have a Harold, so I don't really need to take him out. But if there are more of these, I could definitely get them at a later date. And I'm just, once again, very glad to have these in my collection. So let's take a look at something different. Maybe not ERTL, but a different merchandise range. I know I'd said we'd take a look at another piece of Thomas & Friends merchandise. However, I thought it'd be cool to look at something different. And in front of you here, this is something that I've never showcased on the channel before. And honestly, I don't think I've ever even expressed interest in something like this before. It is a wooden scale model of an American steam loco. On the box, it says scale model vehicle in the 1860s. Prime Steam Express, 1/80th scale train model. And I don't think that this model is necessarily based on any specific class of American steam locomotive. I think more so it's an amalgamation of the popular zeitgeist and consciousness of people when they harken back to an idea of a late 1800s American engine. So I think that's more so what this is, not based on any specific engine. And I think it also has some more toy-like and fantasy elements, as you'll see in a second. And as you can see, this box actually has already been opened because I've built the engine. And this is a very thin box, as you can see here, and it is a Chinese model. It's a pretty cheaply made model. I only paid $4 for this, and this actually came from the vendor who helped finish the sale of the ERTL models, and I was very happy to continue to support their business, as they were very kind and open, and actually helped me search for some more Thomas & Friends stuff that I could purchase at that flea market. So I want to extend my thanks to them. I will not name them, of course, but that was a very good experience and added to the dreamlike quality of my whole experience buying all these Thomas & Friends models over those 2 days at that flea market. On the back here, it just shows a more detailed diagram of what the engine and the detachable carriage, aka tender, looks like. As you can see there, it is made in China. However, for what it's worth, for being those $4, I think that it did turn out pretty well. And for what it's worth, it is a pretty intricate and convoluted model in a good way, I'd say. It does say that the material is plywood. I would say that it's balsa wood, because I think that's what usually these models are made of. I'm not sure if it is plywood. I'm not a wood expert, obviously. You would think so if I collect Thomas Wooden Railway, but I'm not really, so I'm not really sure. However, maybe if someone in the comments will know, they can let me know. So let's take a look at the actual engine model here. There is the engine, and here is the tender. And on the front there, it did say no glue needed. That was a little bit of a farce, as I did need a fair amount of glue to get this model together. Not necessarily saying that it was a poorly designed model, however, I was a bit too rough with some of the pieces, so there was a little bit of user error there, and I had to glue some parts back together to make it work, and also just some parts wouldn't necessarily stick down all the way, so I needed to remedy that. And on the front of the engine here, you can see that it has the cow catcher, once again pointing to it being an American design. It has some buffers right here, which are pretty small. Not sure what that's going to do in the case of going up against buffers in an emergency. And it has a headlight and the funnel, aka which is the chimney, as the model considers it. And it does have the bell right here, the steam whistle. And actually the hardest part of the model to put together was the top section of the boiler right here. It is malleable wood, once again why I thought it might be considered balsa wood, and it bends, it's flexible. And I had to bend it over quite a few parts and connect it in these little holes right here, as you can see, and it just wasn't working. So I had to use a fair amount of super glue actually, just to make sure that it would stay forever, and hopefully that's the case. It does have a wheel configuration of a 262 in the front body of the engine. It has a nice large pistons, and it has these intricate side rods right here, which I think is pretty interesting. Inside the boiler, you can see there's some gears, which doesn't really make sense for a steam engine. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time I checked, there wasn't gears in a steam engine. Maybe there is, actually, and I sound pretty dumb. But I thought that was pretty interesting, and once again, kind of points to toy-like design or more fantasy design for this engine. In the back here, I think one of the interesting parts of this model is the cab. Inside the cab right there, there's some seats. Most of it is pretty sturdy. You can see this part was wiggling a little bit. But as I said, the cab's pretty interesting. It's very wide, but also very detailed. What does that say on there? I guess that says Robo Time, which I'm not necessarily sure what that means. However, on the back right here, once again, there's some buffers, and there's the coupling. I'll just point out really quick. Let's see if I can pick out something like this. It says C20. So when I had this engine, I had a guide like this. So this was where all the parts were. You just pop them out. For example, here's the door to the smoke box. Right here, I could just pop that part out, and it was labeled, and I'd stick it where it needed to go. Here are the instructions. They're actually pretty small. It's only one page of instructions that opens out to this. It's not going to be fully on the camera. And I don't think it says any other information on here. It's all in English, so I guess it was all translated. And the translating was pretty good. So even though it's a Chinese-made model, it is a high quality, low quality, if I could use a type of oxymoron there for describing this model. Let's take a look at the tender really quick. So they call it a detachable carriage, and it does have room for storage. As you can see, this top part opens up right there, and you can look inside the tender. And it does have some nice detailing. It says ROKR, and it has some nice rivet detailing. You can see the foot plates right here have some nice great detailing. And besides that, the tender has 8 wheels, and the wheels kind of move, not necessarily move that much. However, it does on the back here have buffers and a 3D ladder, which is always nice, and the depiction of some headlights on that model. So besides that, I don't think there's that much more to say, although I would like to talk about the couplings. So the couplings actually, I don't know if I did something wrong. This was the part I was most confused on this model, but if I just turn it over to the bottom, this part is not in a orientation where it's supposed to be. I just had to glue this and eyeball it to make sure it stood closely with the rest of the engine and the tender. So that's something that I just had to DIY on the fly. And I'm not a very crafty or handy person in general. However, I was pretty proud of my handiwork there, trying to get this model together, kind of brute forcing my way to getting this model to couple up properly. So besides that, as I said, there's not much more to say on this model. It's a pretty simple wood model. However, I am happy with my purchase. For those $4 that I spent, I think it was a good purchase. And there's even still some wood bits left over, so if anything ever breaks or anything like that, hopefully it doesn't, I can remedy it with those extra pieces. And I'm not sure if I'll paint this engine. It would take a lot of work and be pretty cumbersome to try to paint this model. However, that's definitely something I'd consider for the future. Maybe on a rainy day I could start an endeavor like that. I've never even really painted anything else train related, such as a Thomas Wind Railway model. I haven't gotten around to making a custom as of yet. However, maybe this would be a good experiment and test model for something like that. Although, once again, I don't even know if paint would stick to this model just because the wood is pretty fickle. However, with all that said, I think it's time to take a look at another model. I thoroughly enjoyed taking a look at this, and I do want to purchase more scale model trains and other models in the future. However, I think it's time to go back to our roots and take a look at something definitively Thomas & Friends. As promised, here's the next item that we're going to be taking a look at. And this was actually purchased from the same seller who helped me buy that ERTL Thomas & Friends lot, and also the scale wooden model train that we just took a look at. And it is suffice to say that that seller was very generous and open with their offers for what I could buy. However, I did not originally want to purchase this item. For one reason being that I felt it was incomplete, and also I didn't really have a place for it and an interest in it. As you'll see in a second, it is kind of large, and not that I'm running out of space. However, I would hate to just throw this in a closet somewhere and have it collect dust when I couldn't properly display or showcase its talents or purpose as a piece of merchandise. However, I think it should be better served for us to take a closer look at what this item actually is. And as you can see from this rubber treaded wheel right here, it is a sort of move around Thomas. I'm not sure the proper terminology for what you'd consider this, but it's a free roam, free range, non-GMO Thomas. And that was a little bit of a joke there. But you can see it does have the standard depiction of Thomas. It has his red lining, the number 1 on his side, the red stripes down the boiler, his cab, of course. He does have a nice bunker depiction right here. And it is a very simplistic and generic depiction of Thomas. However, I will say I do really like his face. It is very reminiscent of the CGI Thomas face, which I really like. And here you can see there's some blue sensors on his wheel arches right here. And let's just test out this Thomas for a second. And don't be surprised if he roams off. So you could just hear, I don't know if you could hear the whirring sound or the beeping, but he was struggling a little bit there. He ran off camera and went right into a door. So hopefully that doesn't break the model a little bit, but I think it's okay. And all I did was I press on his dome right here, and you can see his wheel starts to move. And I think we should get a better angle at this Thomas. However, before we do, I'd just like to compare him to his little brother and his baby brother right here. I thought that was pretty funny. I didn't even realize it until I pulled these two guys out. These two I've had for a very, very long time, especially this model, as you can see with the classic face right there. But there's 3 different sizes, and they come with controllers. So this Thomas has this controller, and this Thomas has this one. And the reason why I didn't necessarily want to purchase this guy is because I didn't think he could work without a controller. But now, the more I study him, I think, honestly, it's just you press down on his dome right here, and that's what makes him move. And, of course, he says little expressions and phrases, which I hope won't get me copyright claimed, right? I mean, that can't be copyrighted, the little things he says. However, these two Thomases do similar things. You can see this guy's sensor is in his funnel right here. And this guy, I think, that's a good question. Where is his sensor? It must be in some part of his back or maybe his cab right here. But this guy is this controller, and he has this one, which this one is a forward and sideways. And this one is just a simple back and forth. These two don't have batteries, or at least batteries that work right now. So we won't stress ourselves with trying to unscrew those and whatever. I mean, we'll look at this guy move. You don't really need to see these guys move. They do the same thing this guy does. And just looking at a quick comparison here, I do like how this one has the painted white footplate right here, which I think is a nice detail. This one is obviously the most simple and disproportioned out of all of them. These two have pretty similar proportions, although I do really like this guy, as I said before. This guy's bunker is a little bit thicker and more coal in his bunker, and so does this guy. So there's little differences between them all, as with any comparison between Thomas & Friends merchandise. However, with that said, as promised, let's take a look at how this guy moves around a room. So as you can see, I pulled back the camera a little bit here and we have a bigger angle. However, I still don't think this will be enough to showcase how this guy roams around. So I might just need to go freehand, just with my hand, and move the camera around. So forgive me if it's a little shaky, but let's test it with this way first. So I'll go up to him and press the dome right here. Oh, so he just hit my knee right there off screen. So let's try it again.
Along the track.
Wow, that's unfortunate. So what actually just happened there is Thomas went around, and he went around the base where the camera was, went in between me and the camera, and he was going to make a full circle, and that would have been amazing if just with, but it hit the light right there. So that's unfortunate. Let's see if maybe I can move this light and see if this Thomas can... Oh, and he just went off by himself. Okay. Imagine if I tried to make a series with this guy. That would be total chaos. And I'd need to make the episode ideas around just what he does. So let's try it again. And I think actually he'll make a full circle around. So he made it around, and then he took a left. So then he went over near my chair over there. So let's try it again. I know this is kind of unhinged, unscripted right now, but I think it's very interesting to see what this guy does and see sort of how he's programmed. I'm not sure how many phrases Thomas has. He must have a fair amount. Oh, and there it goes. So you could see he made a full circle around there, which I think is pretty cool. So why don't we go freestyle with the camera, and just finishing my statement right there. I'm not sure how many phrases Thomas has. I'd say about 15, maybe 20. I haven't heard necessarily the same phrases over and over again, but of course with these models they can only say so many things. And I'm sure how he's programmed is randomized, as just if you push on his dome, he goes wherever. And sometimes he doesn't move, as you can see. Or maybe that's just when you pick him up. Oh, so that's a smart design feature. Okay, so he has to be on the ground for him to move around. And he's on the ground, and when you pick him up, he automatically stops. So that's actually pretty well designed for this Thomas. And once again, I don't think he actually has a controller. I think it's all just based on when you press his dome right there. I failed to check, actually. We didn't even look at the bottom of him right here. So let's see what year he is. It says 2009 Ghislaine, so that doesn't help at all, because you know that could be any year under the sun, or at least since 2009. And I guess I should also just point out, these two wheels right here are actually fake. On the bottom right here, there's some just two dummy wheels. You can hear the sound right there. Those are the ones moving. And it says, note, if Thomas malfunctions, simply reset his engine. So that's interesting. Let's hope this guy doesn't turn into an SCP Thomas and go rogue. But with that said, let's take a look at him just roaming around the room. So I am just holding up the camera with my hand, so once again, forgive me. And also, we're working off of natural light right now, so if the lighting's a little bit funky, that's the reason. However, let's test this guy and see where he goes.
Round the bend.
Oh, and he just ran into my feet right there, so I didn't want to show my dogs on camera, I guess you could say. Wooden Railway Edward is very hip with the lingo of 2024, as you can all see. Let's test him again.
Twists and turns.
And he went for my feet again. Thomas is voracious for feet picks. And he stopped right there. Okay. So let's test him one more time. Let's see if we can get him to go straight, you know? That would be pretty interesting.
Twisty trap.
And he did. Oh, well, then he turned. Oh, and he ran into... Okay. Let's see going this way.
Number 1 engine coming through.
Okay, well, Thomas is very high IQ leveled, as you can see. And I don't know, something about this Thomas just makes me want to loosen up a little bit and make some jokes. I think it's just funny how this guy works. He's kind of like a dog that you haven't trained yet. Which honestly is a pretty good description of engines. They're kind of like people. They have some emotions, but they are very unpredictable and don't listen to directions very well, i.e. most episodes of the television series. Okay, I know I said one more time 3 times ago, but one more time. Okay, well, we can't end with that. Let's see what happens if he goes this way. Okay.
Along the track.
Okay, and you can hear him start to whirring right there. It's like a nuclear bomb going off. Well, Thomas, I think that's enough fun for one day, and I think that's enough said about his model, so let's just give him a little pet right there. As I say, he's like my robotic dog right now. So, with that said, I think it's time to move on to the next item. I do particularly enjoy this item, and it is fun to play with him, as you could just see on camera right there. And I'm not sure how much these sensors work, as he kept banging into the wall. However, Thomas, I think you did a pretty good job, and you're a pretty good model for getting you for free. So, let's move on. Well, that was a lot of fun, but I think it's time we take a look at something that won't move around, and if they do, well, that would be a little bit of a problem. Here in front of you, you can see 3 Thomas & Friends VHS tapes, all from varying eras of the television series. Here we have a classic Thomas & Friends VHS tape, and 2 tapes from the hit era. And before we take a look at these, I'd just like to mention that this VHS came from the same seller who I purchased all the other items we've taken a look at so far. And these 2 VHSs were bought from a vendor in a different building of the flea market complex, and we'll take a look at some of the other items I purchased from that seller in a couple minutes. However, first, let's take a look at Spills and Chills and Other Thomas Thrills. I like the alliterative title there, and I also really like the box art. For these classic VHS tapes, specifically the Anchor Bay releases, I like the cover design for the VHSs. How you have the uniquely colored title, and you have a character featured right here, and in the bottom you have a screen cap from an episode featured on the VHS, in this case the Boulder episode, and I really like this box design. Especially I like the one with Birdie. I can't remember which VHS specifically that is, but Birdie is one of my favorite characters if you didn't know, so maybe we'll do a video on that one day, taking a look at more box arts. There's also some pretty poor ones, especially if you get into DVDs like this. I can name a couple that are pretty bad. However, anyway, back to this. You have a pretty standard design. If I bring in Steamies versus Diesels right here, you can see that it has the story stops, as does this DVD, and they shifted pretty nicely from this medium of entertainment to this one, how they formatted these releases of these episodes. You have a little description of what the VHS is about, and you can see it says storyteller Alec Baldwin. Now, Alec Baldwin is one of my favorite narrators for Thomas & Friends. I'd have to say that George Carlin is probably my favorite. However, Alec Baldwin, especially in Season 5, not so much Season 6, but in Season 5 brings a unique flavor to the television series, and I really like his energy and all his character voices. Here you can see some of the episodes featured on this VHS, and most of these are pretty good episodes. And the only one that I really don't like is Toby's Discovery. I feel like that's just an episode that's sort of all over the place. And Stepney Gets Lost could be better. However, besides that, all of these episodes are pretty darn good. Season 5 is actually my favorite season of the television series. And the good thing about these VHSs is there's not that much more to look at. It's not like we can play them. Unfortunately, I don't have a VHS player at this time. And who knows, these might be degraded so much that they can't even be played. However, it's still nice to have these as a memento of former entertainment options that you could have for viewing Thomas and Friends episodes, especially the classic episodes. Here you can see it is actually a blue tape VHS, and it is labeled 2000, so I'm not sure if that was the year this was actually released, or if it's a re-release, or something like that. The box says 1998. The packaging design actually says 2000, so I guess maybe it's a later release of this VHS. I know 2000 is a couple years before they started really transitioning to DVDs, so this was still the preeminent medium for viewing Thomas and Friends episodes. As I said, it is a blue tape, and when the seller sold me this, I bought that for $2. They were really pushing it on me, and unfortunately, I actually already have this episode, or rather, episodes on VHS. I have the same exact VHS, Spills and Chills, so that was a little unfortunate that I already had this VHS. Looking on the front here, I guess this is a different tape, because this one is black, and then if we go on to this one is a blue tape. I'm not sure which one is more rare or which one's more desirable. However, I'm glad that now I have two variations. Good thing they weren't at least exactly the same thing. And now I have two Spills and Chills. I probably won't sell either one of them. I think they're both pretty cool. So now I just have two copies of them. And it's unfortunate I didn't get any more Season 5 VHS tapes. I think out of all of them, I probably have the most of those type of VHSs. And I might have all of the Season 5 episodes on VHS, which is kind of cool. Moving on to the middle one right here, we have Steamies vs. Diesels. And actually, I brought out the DVD for that before. Here it is. And this is actually one of the most classic VHS releases, in my opinion. Or rather, should I say, not necessarily the VHS, but the DVD for me is one of the most classic. I guess I never really had the VHS, so maybe for some people it's classic. But for me, the DVD, just the episodes that were featured on there. If we go to the back, let's see. It has Our Story Stops, Our Thomas to the Rescue, Henry and the Wishing Tree, Squeak, Rattle, and Roll, and Percy's New Whistle. And these episodes are just so classic to me. I remember watching this DVD time and time again. And the episodes on here, as you can see featured on the back, are all very classic. Especially Thomas to the Rescue, I think, is a very good episode. Henry and the Wishing Tree, I like the part of the episode where you can see the inside of the coaches, and you can see the food all rattling around. I think that's a very good use of practical models, and I love stuff like that. And also, Squeak, Rattle, and Roll is a very good episode featuring Gordon. And let's see, where was the other one? Percy's New Whistle is also a pretty good episode. I think Trevor is featured in that episode, and I think the message is good. And honestly, for Season 8, I think a lot of the ideas surrounding the episodes were pretty good in concept. And the longer running time also allowed them to develop more nuanced stories. And I think if they ran with the core concepts they had in Season 8, they could have had a more successful hit era. However, that's a discussion for another day. Looking at this VHS tape, it is once again one of the black ones. And I think by this point they phased out the blue tapes. It does have the printed on label right there. And maybe that's a signifier of the newer VHS tapes. Maybe the newer ones don't have the sticker. Rather, they have the printed on label. On the back right here, it is the same box art as is standard with all the other VHSs. It says the running time is 38 minutes, and of course, it doesn't really have any other bonus features. In between the episodes, I think they have those terrible CGI learning segments. However, of course, it doesn't have any of the station stop fun games or anything like that, as the DVD, I think, probably does. Yeah, it says web fun. You're not going to find that on the VHS. That's kind of funny. Let's see. Were these released in the same year, 2004? and I assume, 2004. So this was a couple years before the VHS would become obsolete. I think at least probably 3 years. I think 2007 was the last year anyone was really making VHS tapes. And I think that's enough talking about this VHS. And the last one here is Track Stars. And this is of, let's see, what kind of episodes are on here? And it's very interesting. Now the VHS design has kind of changed. You can see on the back here, this is very reminiscent of how its actual DVD counterpart is. And at this point, they were probably just taking the DVD design and slapping it on the VHS right here. So let's see, what year is this? This is 2006. So yeah, this is pretty soon to the closure of VHS as a medium of entertainment. The running time is 50 minutes, so this has a couple more episodes than this VHS had. I think it has 6 episodes on here. And of course, it would be longer than even these classic era DVDs, as the episodes bumped up from 4 minutes 30 seconds to a little bit longer, I think 7 minutes. And the design here is pretty good. And if I just bring in another VHS tape right here, I'll bring in It's Great to Be an Engine, which is actually labeled 2004. So I was hoping that this VHS would be a little bit older. I purchased that at a thrift store a couple years ago, and I know as it went on, these VHSs became rarer. So this one actually is probably a little bit more rare. However, there must be a VHS after this. I can't specifically off the top of my head name the release that was very rare. It was a variation of one of the DVDs of the hit era, but this isn't it. So this was probably mass-produced. However, I think there is maybe 1 or 2 releases after this that is a lot more rare. And I think I paid $2 for this from the seller, and I paid $5 each for this, which is pretty expensive, and I will admit that. However, at the time, as I said, I was very enamored by the experience I was having, and the guy actually offered that I could buy all his VHS and DVD releases for, I think it was $50, which I was like, no way, I was putting the limit somewhere. So maybe one day if I go back, I could probably purchase a couple more of those. However, most of the DVDs I already had, and I'm not necessarily a home media collector as a standard anyway, so I wasn't very intrigued by that offer. However, maybe someday I can go back and purchase some more of those VHSs and DVD releases. Besides that, I don't think there's really that much more that I have to say about these VHSs. I am very glad to have them in my collection now, and that I can probably display them on my shelf. I'll switch out some older ones that I got and put these up there and display them. And even though I can't actually watch these VHSs, it's always nice to have these as a collector's item and sort of a symbol of, look, these are Thomas & Friends media, and these are displays of classic episodes, or in this case, maybe more hit era episodes, although it's still a nice staple to see this was the way that these episodes were originally viewed in a home media sense. So with that said, I think it's time to take a look at something else, and maybe something not strictly Thomas & Friends related. Now we're going to be taking a look at a series of things, all united under the common banner, as you could probably guess from the title right here, of model railroads. And I know that's pretty crazy coming from Wooden Railway Edward. I'm pretty inept when it comes to anything model trains. However, I've always had a passion and interest for model railroading. I've just never really dabbled in it that much. I know a couple years ago I made that video where I discovered and took a look at those model trains, those Lionel trains, and I know I had a lot of people in the comments. Still to this day I get comments correcting me on stuff I said in that video, and I think it's really great that I opened up to that discussion and that people enjoy that video. However, with this recent flea market trip, I've actually been very invested in model trains, and I think it's actually something I could pursue further in addition to the Thomas collection. So taking a look right here, you can see we have a magazine. It is a model railroading magazine, and it was 50 cents from June 1957. And believe it or not, I got these 2 magazines actually for free, which I thought was great. And I purchased these from that seller who I purchased those 2 previous VHS tapes that we looked at. And I think it's time for a little bit of a story time. So when I went to this flea market, I originally went to one building, and that was the building where I got the ERTL items and the wooden train, the kit, and I was having a good time looking around that building. However, I thought that was it until I walked down the sidewalk under this building, and I went to the other building, and oh my gosh, it was a whole model railroad shop, and there was so many different vendors, there was different layouts set up, and I could not tell you how much stuff was there. There was books, DVDs, baseball cards, there was old toys, antiques, video games, everything under the sun. But a majority of the building, it was a huge square foot place. A majority of the place was actually dedicated to model trains and model railroads. And there was just so much stuff for sale, classic stuff, new stuff. And it was just pretty amazing. And I actually met the guy there and we chatted a bit. And we actually built a pretty good bond. And he helped me pick out some stuff that I could use for my videos and also to start a model railroad collection. And actually later that day, I went over to his shop in a different town in the area I live, and he actually recently opened up a model railroad shop, and it was actually the building of my old dentist, which is kind of funny. And I went in there, and that was also a pretty cool shop, and it was just a really great day, and I built a really great connection with this guy, and it was really great that still in 2024, they were selling stuff like that, and there was still a market for stuff like that. And that filled me with a lot of joy. And once again, it was a great experience that I've always really dreamed of having a location like that near my house, a place where I can go and buy stuff like that. And hopefully I'll be able to go back and expand my collection. However, I got these magazines for free at the end of my purchase. He was like, go over to this cabinet right here and pick out some magazines. Maybe it could help you with some things that you could do to start your model railway. And interchangeably, I'll use railway and railroad. Since I'm seasoned in Thomas and Friends, I prefer to say railway. Sorry, it's a tongue twister, I guess. However, I know a lot of people, especially in the United States, obviously, will call it a model railroad. So that's just a idiosyncrasy from me being a Thomas and Friends creator, so I apologize for that. However, looking at this magazine, as I said, it's from June 1957, and I think it's just pretty cool. And probably some of the advice in here is not very applicable to what I'm doing. However, as you can see, the pages right here, it's just pages and pages of awesome stuff about these models right here. And here you can see here was sort of a tram right here and an electric tram, I guess. And look, here's descriptions of tracks and the layouts you can make. And I think that's just so awesome. Just looking through here, it's so interesting. Here you can see you got a manual for $1. Imagine that. And here it's just pages of stuff like that. And that's just so, you can hear my voice. That's just awesome to see. This one was $5. You could see a little bit of inflation there. And this one was from October 2003. So it's still pretty old. It's 20 years old. And in here you can see here's just more, well, here you can, train ship cookies. Wow. Train shape cookies, rather. I don't know why everything's so hard for me to say today, but train shape cookies. Let's see, where's it? World's Greatest Hobby.com. Oh, well, maybe I'll have to check that out. I wonder how good they are now. I wonder if this gift card would work. And here you can see, once again, it's just tons of stuff about model trains. Oh, actually, I think Lego made a model of this not too long ago, this design. And I know Sam's Trains, I think, reviewed this a couple years ago. I remember watching that video. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just going crazy a little bit. However, I think that's enough looking at that for right now. But as I said, look, here's another advertisement for a controller. And that's actually something I still need to purchase to actually make my model trains go around a layout. However, for free, I thought this was a great deal. And the guy said I could take more. I only took 2 as I felt bad taking all the stock. However, once again, it's just awesome to get these for free. And I think now we'll take a look at something that, this is a deviation. This that we're going to take a look at actually did not come from that flea market. Actually, earlier in the day, the reason why I was out and about is because I was going to a church sale, I guess you could say. It was sort of a rummage sale. And once again, I was just really shocked when I saw the advertisement online that something like that was coming towards me, or not coming towards me, rather, but in my area. And I was very ecstatic to go to that sale, and I actually got some good stuff. I got some baseball cards, some books, and of course this, which is a 1930 town mini structures HO scale cutout buildings. So I've never really dabbled in cutouts like this before, and I'm not sure if I'll actually build this. Looking online, it's not really that expensive, so probably I could get away with building this, although it is still pretty intact. Nothing's really been touched with this. So you can see here's the cutouts, and basically you cut these out with, I guess, maybe an X-Acto knife, and then you build these scale buildings. I guess we got the part here where it's not the front. Okay, so you can see here, oh, here's a good example. Maybe you don't even need an X-Acto knife. Maybe you can just like pull it out with your hands. And you can see it has the directions right here, and I think that's pretty cool. I could probably use these for my series or just any other remakes or videos I do with my models. And here it says June 1976, so this is also pretty old. And I thought this was pretty interesting. Look, back in the day it was $2. It actually probably would be $2 today too. So that just goes to show that the hobby has always been very expensive, anything related to trains even back then. And I think that's, I just have been waiting to build that until I made this video, so hopefully now during the summer I can work on that a little bit. However, probably the more interesting thing right here is you can see there's a ton of track. So I bought this for $5. The lady who sold it to me was very nice. She explained what it was. And here you can see here's a lot of track. So once again, this story requires a little bit of an explanation and some detours from what we previously looked at. So next, we're going to be taking a look at a couple model trains, actually, some model rolling stock. And I purchased those from, going back to the flea market, the guy who had the model train display at the flea market. And, however, I didn't have any track. However, I was like, well, I bought this earlier in the day at this rummage sale, and I tried it out, and actually those HO trains work on this track. So I was just very happy that this was HO track. I was expecting it maybe to be an obsolete form of track. However, this is perfectly fine, and it actually works. So I was so happy with that. And here you can see here's a switch track. Here's another switch track. And when I tested this out, I almost had a full loop. And we'll actually get to that in a future video of how I completed this. So as you can see, it's an overarching story, and just how the day progressed and how it went along. It was just really an amalgamation of many good things, many little good things that happened. And honestly, it was a pretty perfect experience for me, which is very rare. And here's some curved pieces, and here's another switch track. So I think there was 3 of those, which is actually pretty good. Here you can see here is a curved track that has the little area where a car can cross. I guess it's a little railroad crossing, you could say. And here's just some more curved track. So I was very happy to get these. And when I was home later that day and discovered that these were all applicable to each other and able to be put together and made into an actual little model railway display, I was just very happy, as I said, and it was just a really great experience. And I think that these are pretty old pieces of track, probably. These are probably maybe about as old as this right here. However, they still work. The trains were able to go on them. And as you can see with the switch track right here, like this still works. The feature right here as the track switches. And let's see, what else is in this bag? So what else is in this bag? I'm not sure actually what this bag is. Probably don't need it. It says discard bag on the label right there. So I guess that's just a little warning of what I need to do. And on here, I'm not sure what here's the $5 label. So if you didn't think I was telling the truth, it was $5. I never actually even noticed that. But in this bag right here is a mess of wires and cables and probably something that's not very safe or usable anymore. So if you could tell me what this is, this must have been connected to these track pieces, I guess, or some old model railway buildings or something. And in this little baggie right here, oh, I just threw it across the set. In this little baggie, you can see that there is, here's some not screws, but let's see if the camera could focus. Thank you. Here's some little nails, I guess, to use with the track. And here are some, I assume these go on the switches if you wanted to make them motorized. I'm not really sure what these are, or maybe these were to power the track. Once again, I'm not very versed in model railroads or the techniques or usage or operation of them. So if you could tell me what these are, I'm not really sure. Maybe these are obsolete in the modern day and these were just something old. But once again, it's a little embarrassing. I don't know what these are. Oh, well, I just figured out maybe these go together. Oh, if the camera would focus. Good grief. Sorry about that. You can see that these go together. It's a blurry mess right now, but you can see that these fit together like this. So maybe there's something to that. I'm not really sure, and I'm not the right person to ask. However, I did want to show that I got this track from that rummage sale at the church, and that was the same day that I purchased all this other stuff. So once again, it was a great day for Wood and Railway Edward. I had a lot of fun that day, and just the series of events that led to me getting all this stuff was really great. And it was great to actually get this track for $5, as I spent a little bit more on the track trying to complete a full loop for the engines to run on. And unfortunately, actually, I shouldn't say engines, because I don't have any engines as of yet. I don't have any locos. However, I do have a fair amount of rolling stock, so now I'm building up a little bit of an arsenal and collection for my model railroad pursuits. So that's pretty interesting. And I think it's time to take a look at some buildings that could go on my new model railroad. And I know here in front of you, you might be shocked at what I'm showing you. And no, I'll move it around. This is not movie magic. I'm not doing editing tricks. And I'll be very careful with this, because this is the holy grail of any model railroad collection. And as I said, I'm not very versed in model railroads. I don't really know the history or anything like that. However, any good person would know that this is just absolutely the holy grail, the pinnacle of any collection. And I'm just so proud to have this item, this little staircase right here. And the guy was very interested in model trains. He looked like he did it his whole life. However, I don't know if he knew what he was sitting on right here. And I was able to purchase this that day at that flea market. And as you can see, the craftsmanship of this item is just through the roof. And just to have this in my hands, in my collection right now, is just amazing. And to be one of the first items to delve into my collection and start my collection, it was just amazing. And I'm just trying to catch my breath right now. I'm just flabbergasted that I was able to get something such as this. It's just so amazing. And I don't even have any words to describe it. It's like the white face, even bigger than the white face getting this. And I'm just so lucky and blessed to have this. And of course, okay, no one cares about that. Of course, it was a stupid staircase. Let's take a look at something a little bit more cool. So obviously that was a joke. I have no idea what this is, and it is not worth anything. So that's a little thing that came with a couple more buildings that I got. So let's take a look at them. Here you can see, here's a couple, I guess you could say they're log cabins right here. And they actually do have some pretty nice detailing. So one of the things when I was in that store, I thought I would get those ERTL items, those ERTL new in the box items, and actually this slipped my mind a little bit. I failed to mention the guy who I purchased those ERTL new in the box items was actually the same guy who I purchased these and the later models that we'll take a look at and the 2 VHS tapes. So I would like to clear that up. I was a little bit of time between the times I filmed that part of the video and this, so there's probably a little bit of discrepancy in between there of what I said. However, I would just like to clear up that was the same guy. And I know the story's pretty hard to follow at this point. It was a long day of just journeys to different places and the interconnectedness, as I mentioned before with the track, how everything worked together. However, back to this, here are some model buildings, and I thought it would be nice to purchase some of these buildings. So as you can see, they have prices on here, but actually that wasn't the price I paid. I think in total for all the buildings I got, I paid about $10, which actually isn't that bad. And the guy was very nice. Since it was my first time there, he gave me a little bit of a discount for being a newcomer to the flea market. And as you can see here, it is just a very nice log cabin right here. It has some nice detail of a bench and also a wheelbarrow. And it's all made of plastic, of course. However, for what it's worth, getting all of this together collectively for $10, it was very nice to get this. And if I just put this in the background of a video, along with this weird looking staircase thing right here, that would be just nice scenery, especially for maybe a more country depiction of the island of Sodor or anything like that. Here, this one has a little bit less detail. It does have a nice chimney right here, and turning to the back, it has a nice window, as does this one. And overall, I'm pretty happy with these. I do think it's kind of interesting how they're designed. I'm not really sure what this actually is. If you can see the texture right here, this is pretty flimsy, and I don't really want to break it. But you can feel that it, well, you can't feel it. That was a pretty dumb thing to say, but I can feel it's pretty rough. So that's a pretty nice design of these buildings. And we'll take a look at another one. Here is actually a station junction, a little platform right here. And if we bring in just a solo piece of track right here, it actually looks pretty nice up against a piece of track. And this is what really enticed me into model railroads. When I was in that store, just the feelings I got of looking all this stuff, it really wanted to make me spend all my money on this stuff. Of course, I couldn't do that. As I said before, I'm frugal with my cash, and I don't really like spending money on frivolous stuff. However, this was a little bit of a splurge for me, and that's why I bought these buildings. So here you can see it says Pikesville Junction. I'm not sure if maybe that's just a standard fake city that this model railroad company uses for the buildings. It does say made in Taiwan, ROC. I'm not sure if that's a company maybe. Once again, I probably sound pretty dumb to people who are versed in model railroads. And once again, I'm not sure of the age of this item. It doesn't really have a date on it like any other Thomas items would. And once again, I'm comparing everything to Thomas & Friends. I apologize for that, but it's the medium I know best. Here it has a nice colored roof, and it has a bench. And an interesting thing is it actually has a blue phone booth, which is pretty interesting. And I didn't actually notice this before, but in the phone booth, it has a little red phone right there, which is a really nice touch. And I guess this could actually be a double-sided platform. As you can see on right here, it actually has a double-sided bench. So I guess if you turn it this way, you could have a track like that, and let's say I'll use a different piece of track. You could have one like that. So actually that ends up looking pretty nice, and even though it's pretty cheap, I even feel like you could get away with putting a wooden piece of track. I don't have one on hand, but you could get away with using a wooden model for this item as well. And lastly, let's take a look at the biggest one that I got. And this building is probably the most apt to be used with my wooden models. And it is this building right here. It's sort of like a warehouse, I guess you could say. And flipping it around right here, you can see is blank on the back. However, on the bottom, it has these little K's right here, which I don't really know what that means. On the side right here, it says K-Line, which maybe is some type of brand, once again, or company, I'm not really sure. However, I think this looks really nice and is the scale, definitely, of some of my wooden railway buildings. And I think if I put this in the background, for example, in my remake of Thomas's Day Off, I put a lot of the buildings, such as Mr. Jolly's Chocolate Factory, in the background like this, just the set dressing. As the hit era did, they had a lot of boring sets like that, and just sort of an industrial look like that. I think it looks really good. And even if I turn it like this, it still looks like sort of, just like an industrial building. And one other thing I really like to do with my models is, I'll show you an example right here. So I'll take these wooden risers right here, which I get so much use out of. They're actually holding up the camera right now. And if I put these like this, and I also did this in Thomas's Day Off, and I believe I also did it in James Goes Too Far. And you can see that it's on a little platform right there, and I think that actually looks pretty cool. And that's something I do a lot, and honestly, I'll get a lot of use out of this. And for getting all these buildings for $10, I thought that was a pretty good steal. And for my first foray into model railroading, I think it's good to start off with these buildings. And of course, I could put these around the circle that I'll make of the track and my rolling stock and run them around a little bit. And honestly, I'm really excited for getting more into model trains. I know it's such an expensive hobby. The locomotives can be anywhere from $100, $200. However, if I start off with a starter engine, I think I could actually build up a pretty good collection, especially with getting more old rolling stock from this flea market. And once again, I'm just so happy that I was able to have this experience, and I was able to also share it with you guys. I've been sitting on this for a couple weeks, and I've just been so happy seeing these on my shelf and also eager to make a video like this. So I think it's finally time to move on to look at some of the rolling stock that I was able to purchase that day. And actually, once again, it's an interesting story. We'll tell it in a second. The penultimate section of this video probably features some of the most interesting things that I purchased at my day at the flea market. So without further ado, let's bring in the first item, which is a caboose. And now a caboose comes at the end of a train. However, I thought we'd start things off a little different and work our way from the back of the train up towards the front. And I will warn you right now, of course, an engine does pull the long line of cars and the caboose you can see in front of you. However, at this time, I do not have a locomotive. I have the tracks for a model railroad, I have the cars and rolling stock in this caboose, but I do not have an engine. Hopefully that will change soon and I can add it to my collection. But for now, let's look at this nicely detailed caboose. It says Pennsylvania on the side, and I assume that means Pennsylvania Railroads. And on the top there, you can see it is a little bit dusty. And just a little bit of background before we keep looking at this model. This model was purchased not at the flea market, so that was a little bit of a lie. However, it was actually purchased at the model railroad store that was recommended to me by the man who was running the flea market. It was his store that he just recently opened up. So later that day, I went to that store, and it was also just a really great experience. There was a lot of cool stuff there. There was a lot of new stuff that hopefully I'll maybe be able to get my hands on. And also a cool feature of the store was that it had direct links to retailers or manufacturers, I guess you could say, like Bachman. So you could get discounted prices on the items that you purchase from those model railroad companies. And this item was purchased along with the other things that we'll take a look at in a second, and it was actually in the back of the shop near a storeroom, and it was just in a box of some miscellaneous rolling stock, and I asked about it, and the guy running the shop actually gave it to me for a great deal. So I was very thankful for that, and honestly, when I'm buying these model railroad items, I do not care really what condition they are in, or what brand they are, or what age they are. I really just want nicely detailed models, and if they're a little beat up, that doesn't really bother me, as if you think about a real railroad, the rolling stock and all of the different cars and everything, you always see they're graffitied and they're beat up from traveling across the country. Of course, if you're in the United States, a very large country, lots of railroads, and of course, most of it is engines that deal with freight. And that's a big industry. So you can see it's very industrial, beat up and stuff. So that really doesn't bother me. And especially you can see with this, it actually is in pretty good condition. So even if you settle for maybe lower quality or older models such as this that I got for I think maybe $3 when you average it out, it actually works out in the end and you can get some really great deals. If we look at the bottom here, I don't know if it says a manufacturer or anything like that. And the springs right here, you can see they're actually metal springs, which is also really nice. On some of the other box cars that we'll be taking a look at, I think they work a little bit better. Here, they're a little bit stunted in their movement. However, if we look at the side right here, most of it is plastic. This whole body of the caboose is plastic. It has a it has a double R and the P in the middle. I'm guessing that's the logo for Pennsylvania Railroad. I'm not sure if this is a real thing. Once again, I am not a train expert by any means. I just like collecting the merchandise. And it has some details of numbering on there. And you can also see it has some rivet detailing. And what I really enjoyed is that there's separately fitted railings, a wheel, I guess that's a brake wheel, and ladders too. And these ladders were a little bit more bent out of shape when I originally purchased this item. However, I was able to bend them back into shape with a little bit of force. So that was very nice. And I don't think there's that much more to say about this item. Once again, the molding is just exceptional. Even if you can see in the windows here, it has the divider section for the windows. It has nice detailing of this box or container compartment underneath the main body. As I mentioned, the rivet detailing. And the top also has some nice detailing of these designs and textures. So overall, this is a very nice item. And although I'm not too interested in the era of model railroads that deal with steam trains, I'm more interested in diesels and maybe some more of the modern rolling stock. This is still a very nice item to have, even if it doesn't fit in with the other things that I purchased. And I mean, hopefully one day I will get a steam locomotive that's a model train, and I can use that at the back of the train. And of course, cabooses are always cool. I think back to Strasburg Railroad. Near that railroad, they have something like a caboose motel. I can't remember the exact name of it. I've never been to it, but that's just kind of what it reminds me of, with the Pennsylvania name, of course. And it's things like that, remembering old model railroads and actually real-life railroads, that is pretty interesting when taking a look at these items. Next, let's take a look at something that I didn't think about this until now. It's basically the same color, if you can bring it into here. Actually, I believe it is the exact same color, so I didn't actually plan that out. Not very good diversity on my part. However, if we take a closer look at this, you can see it is a boxcar, and it's actually pretty hefty in its weight. I believe it has a metal weight at its bottom right here. You can see its base is actually metal as well, and the rusting is a little bit less on this item. And let me just show you the springs really quick. You can see that the springs actually work surprisingly well on this item. On the side, it says Burlington Route Everywhere West, and on here it just has some details about the capacity, the load limit, stuff like that, and a little logo right there, maybe for the fictional company that this is portraying, or maybe a real company, who knows. And if we look at the top right here, once again, some very nice detailing. You have this long strip that goes across the top, and patterns right here on the top as well. It doesn't have any of the wheels up here next to the ladder. I think the ladder is a molded part of the container part of the boxcar, which is fine. The doors open, I believe. You can see I just slightly opened that door right here. I was fiddling with them earlier. However, I can't exactly remember which ones work well and which ones don't. And I don't really want to break the doors, so that's why I'm a little cautious with using them right here. However, I think I'm able to get this one open at least a little bit. And let's see on the other side. Yeah, this door actually does open a fair amount. I think the rails that hold these sliding doors are a little bit old. As you can see, this part right here just popped out. So I'm not going to fiddle with it too much. However, you can see a little bit of the inside right there. And this would be good for staging. Maybe if you just put this on a siding with a couple crates and a little model of a figure right here, that would look cool. A little scene right there. But you can see on the inside, there's just a little pattern of the flooring. And that is accurate to how these boxcars in real life are detailed on the inside. So that's actually a really nice attention to detail on the part of the manufacturers of this item. I don't think there's much else to say, except I didn't really mention the couplings. I believe that these are the older style couplings, and recently I think they've upgraded to maybe couplings that better represent knuckle couplers, if I'm not mistaken. However, as I said, I don't really care. I'm fine with buying older stock and these older models that have these couplings. And for what I've found, let's just put up an example right here in the background. Okay, so the caboose is done, and let me just put this boxcar right here, and let's see if I can get them to couple on screen. So if I bring the boxcar up, pretend there's a train attached to it, and yeah, it couples fine. And I also forgot to mention that actually on the back of this caboose, there isn't a coupler, so that's also a nice attention to detail. I'm conditioned with Thomas Wooden Railway to assume that everything has a magnet. Obviously, that's their way of coupling. Even things like Birdie on the back, he has a magnet. I'm not sure what he's coupling to. But anyway, back to this. I just want to mention the coupling situation right here, and I think it's fine. You can see it still works fairly well. And I'm not sure if they make adapters, so I can attach this maybe if I get a knuckle coupler locomotive or something like that. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Next up, we have a very, very similar design to the last model that we took a look at, and it is a boxcar. And also, quickly, I want to mention how smoothly these boxcars roll on the rails, and the sound it makes is just very satisfying. So I just wanted to mention that. It's different with, for example, Thomas Wooden Railway track, how the models can roll along the track, but it just kind of feels buttery smooth right here. There's a little bit of friction, especially with something like traction rail or clickety-clack track for the Thompson Wind Railway line. And as a user primarily interested in that for most of my collecting career, that is what I've been conditioned to be exposed to. However, now that I have purchased these, it's interesting to see the variations in how these run. However, side tangent aside, if we can see on the side right here, I believe this is a B and an M, and the writing here actually is just gibberish, so there's not really anything there. And on the side right here, once again, it has a BM and a number right there, and it has some more of the capacity, load limit, stuff like that. The sliding doors on this one are also a little bit finicky. However, you can see they do open up a little bit, and luckily both sliding doors are on this model. Oh, and this one actually probably works the best out of all of them. You can see how much that opens, and that's what it looks like when it's fully open. And maybe on the inside right there, you can get a better picture of how these are, I guess you could say, graded on the inside. I think that's supposed to represent something like a wooden planks on the inside of that. And on the bottom right here, it's once again metal. And although these are different designs on the side, I'm assuming they're from the same manufacturer, as they are very similar. And honestly, this is probably one of my favorite designs, and even a little better than this one. Just for the color variation compared to this, you can see this top bit right here is black. And also this has one of the wheels on the separately fitted wheels right here, which is also really nice. And let's see, the wheel, yeah, the springs and the wheels still work. And honestly, there's not much rusting except for this part right here, which is overall very good. And let's just look at the couplers real quick. I think you can actually unscrew that. You can see it has one of those. And so maybe you can fit those out with different couplings, which would actually be really nice. I do have to clean these. As you can see, there's like a stain right there. I haven't tried getting these out. I wanted to preserve these to show how I bought them at that store. And overall, in the store, they're actually pretty clean. However, they probably were a little bit dustier when I first purchased them. Now that they've been sitting around, they probably become a little bit more clean. Although, who knows, maybe they collected more dust when they're sitting out. And hopefully after this video, I can really dust these models and get them looking as clean as possible. Although, as I mentioned, cleanliness is not the biggest factor to me when dealing with these model trains, as honestly, the weatheredness, not sure if that's a word, but the weatheredness gives a little bit of realism. And I know actually in real life, some people weather their models. So maybe I'm just having that done without actually putting in any of the effort in weathering the models. Here's one that has a very similar design to this locomotive right here. Although on this one, it has an NH and New Haven. And unfortunately, the sliding door is removed from this model, which is a little bit of a bummer. And you can see here, actually, how dusty that is. I was just talking about dust. Well, you can see there, it's a pretty big dust buildup in there. And let's see if this door... Okay, this door really slides open. So that's actually really nice. You can see how the door slides open. And unfortunately, this one doesn't have the sliding door. And I believe actually the story with this is that I wanted to buy a different piece of rolling stock, but this was actually packaged in instead of the one I wanted, which is a little bit of a bummer. However, it really doesn't matter to me. I can face this away from any camera or anything that I'm doing. And honestly, if I really was desperate, I could probably find something that could cover up as a door. So it's not the end of the world for me. And once again, these were averaged out probably to about $3 per. So once again, it's really not that big of a deal. The springs on this work a little bit less. I don't think really they work at all. And, well, on this side they kind of do. And you can see just how this part, I was going to call it a bogie, I guess, what is set up. There's a fair amount of rusting. Once again, there's metal bit. And I failed to mention on the other ones that you can see the undercarriage right here actually has some cool detailing, which you'll really never see. So it's awesome that this manufacturer, who I'm not sure of, you can let me know in the comments if you know, added this extra detailing. And I just think that's pretty cool. And it does actually look like this is a different wheel. If you look on this one, I just noticed this now. You can see rusted parts right here, but this one has black wheels, so that's different. I'm not sure if it's picked up on the camera, but you can see that looks a lot cleaner. So I wonder if this was fixed recently, as that's not really the same wheels as these. So that's actually pretty interesting. So I'll have to maybe ask about that the next time I go to that shop. Next, we'll be breaking away from the box cars and taking a look at something pretty cool, which is a tanker car. And it just derailed off camera, so I'm fixing it for a second before I bring it on. It derailed again. Here it is. Didn't derail the third time, luckily. And let me just take you off the tracks to cause no more delays. And you can see this is actually a pretty nicely detailed model. It says Deep Rock on the side, and once again has some of the more details of the load limit and stuff like that. On the end right here, you can see it has that nice detail of the separately fitted wheel right there. And also, it has this nice handrail detailing all along the side with this metal rail. It's a pretty thin rail, but it's very nicely detailed. It has a separately fitted ladder on both sides. And on the top right here, it has the rivet detailing and the detailing up here of the parts of the tank. And also, I believe this is, it's plastic. I was going to say it's metal, but along the base right here, this chassis part is plastic, and then this also plastic tanker is fitted on top. So this is a fair amount lighter compared to something like this. However, it's still fairly hefty for what it's worth. On the bottom right here, it has this metal part, of course, that connects to the wheels right here. And the wheels, once again, are a little bit rusted, but nothing that's too bad. And it has the same standard couplings on the sides right here. And just for size comparison, let me bring in the box car. So this is a tad bit shorter than the box car, and lengthwise, I think it's also pretty much the same length. I'm not sure if these models are really known for their scaling. However, I think that they're a little bit smaller scaled than the British models. Honestly, I'm most versed in HO models, British models, watching YouTubers like Sam's Trains a lot of the time. However, from that, I've gleaned that these models are probably a little bit smaller in scale compared to those British models. And I think you can tell if you really look at them. The track is kind of big compared to these models. And the caboose right here is just probably, I'd say that's in scale. That's probably pretty close. And actually, the last item that we're going to be taking a look at, in this part of the video at least, is another box car. And this is probably the most visually interesting box car. And although it's not my favorite, I think it actually is pretty cool. It is this box car right here. And obviously, the thing that stands out to you is the color scheme. It says Baby Ruth, good candy. And of course, that's a reference to the Baby Ruth candy. And on the bottom right here, you can see the price tag is $5.49, and this was not a part of the box where I found these other items. This was actually just in another part of the store, and that's what I paid for it, $5.49, I believe. And on the bottom right here, you can see it is all plastic, and this body part is also plastic. So there's not really much metal on here, and I do believe that even the chassis are plastic too. So I don't actually think maybe that there's any metal on here, which is a little disheartening for this item. And you can feel it. This feels a lot lighter compared to something like this, or even the tanker right here. However, that doesn't mean that it's a bad model. It just obviously is a little bit lower quality than these models, which was awesome getting them for $3 each. And you can see some more of the detailing right here. It says a Curtis product. And once again, it has some nicely detailed information right here. It has, they picked out in the plastic a detail of the ladder. And it's the same on this side. And also, I really like the weathering that's on this model. Once again, it probably was not intentional. And some people might not like it. However, I think it looks really cool. And just the way it's done, it really does look like it's an old box car. And I'm not really sure, once again, what company this is. I think I actually looked it up online, and maybe I'll put it in the corner of the video somewhere, what manufacturers made these specific cars. But I think I looked this up earlier. I can't remember which company it was, maybe Tyco, don't quote me on that, but that kind of rings a bell in my head. I'm not really sure, but it still is a pretty cool model nonetheless. And if I put it up next to this boxcar, it is a little bit smaller in the height-wise, and the length-wise it is of the same length. So, for the most expensive one, obviously, it's probably the most lackluster. However, just from the details on the side right here, I think it's pretty cool. And even with the plastic wheels, it still works fine and runs, as I said, buttery smooth on the track right there. So let's just bring these all back into frame for this closing segment. And I just want to reiterate, that this was such a great purchase that I was able to make. And although it wasn't technically at the flea market, it was an extension of the flea market. And also, I just want to point out, I think it's really important to support brick and mortar stores, such as the one I went to that recently opened up, which is a huge rarity. And support these stores that sell stuff like this, model trains. And even though I'm not really even into that much, I still think it's cool to support these establishments and give money and put money into hobbies such as this, which I think is a really cool hobby. And unfortunately, when money gets tight, this is probably one of the first things to go. But as they offered me affordable prices, I think that's also a pretty big component in making a good business such as this. And I hope to support it in the future. And of course, this is awesome that I got all this stuff. And I've already made a mini train right here of rolling stock. And actually, for the closing segment, I was going to put these together on camera. But how about I quickly put these together and we can see what they look like in a line. As I mentioned, I don't yet have a model train. However, I thought Thomas would suffice as being the engine to pull this long train of model railroad cars. And they just ran off the track right there, so I think that's a good time to stop. Thank you, Thomas, for being the engine of capability, I guess you could say. And I just wanted to show those pieces of rolling stock in a train right there. Obviously, you can see we ended off with the caboose. And although they don't exactly match the era of when these models were intended to be put together with, I still think that it's a pretty cool addition to my collection. Now that I have the track, the rolling stock, all I need now is an engine. So, without further ado, I think it's time to take a look at the last thing in this video, and then let's do a wrap-up. This video is definitely a longer one, and it actually might be the longest video on my channel ever. As you can see, I love to talk, so let's get straight into that last part. Those pieces of model railroad rolling stock were not the only things I bought that day at the model train store. I also purchased a Thomas & Friends item, which is this box you can see in front of you. And it is not Trackmaster, Thomas One Railway, Take Along, ERTL, or wait, it is ERTL. As you can see right here, it says ERTL, but from a quick glance, this doesn't look like an ERTL item. You can see the weird coupling sticking out right there. It's metal, or rather, should I say a magnet. You can see this lever on the top of his cab right there, and you think to yourself, what is this? And then you look to the corner right here, and it says Gold Rail. And now this is a thing that's very obscure for the history of Thomas & Friends merchandising in the United States. If we go to the back right here, you can see a little bit more about the odd coupling system. It says connect, move lever to right. And for the disconnect, you move the lever on the cab, or in this case, Thomas's bunker, to the left. And here's a little character card right here, and it says, frequently getting into mischief with his identical twin Ben, Bill can sometimes frustrate the more serious engines. Once again, an apt description of Bill right here. And sadly, we are missing the other twin, the other half of this devilish duo, a devious combo, I guess you could call it. Oh, I almost opened the package right there. And as you can see, it does look like someone maybe has opened this in the past. There's a little bit of residue right there. However, this was marketed as new in the box for $10. I saw this on the way coming out of the store, or rather, should I say, when I was checking out. I had already purchased those items, the model trains, the rolling stock, and I saw this on the display, and I thought, for $10, who can go wrong? And of course, we'll get into that a little later, and also I can put more explanation on a little infographic on the screen, perhaps, when I'm editing the video. However, let's quickly look at the year right here, and it is so small I have to hold it up to my eyes to be able to see it. It says, well, nothing. It doesn't have a date. So it has the logo right here, and a little writing in different languages, but no date. On the top right here, another indicator that this was pretty interesting to me was the Shining Time Station branding, which is pretty cool. And well, you look at that on the bottom right here, it probably has the date, 1993. I was just looking in the wrong place. Well, good thing I turned it over to the bottom. So it says 1993, the ERTL company, made in China. And I guess all ERTL items maybe were made in China. And now let's try to open this model up. I've only briefly opened this up just to make sure that Bill was actually in there. As I said, it looked like someone maybe had previously opened it up, but at the present, I haven't actually looked at the model out of the packaging that it's in. So let me open this box up. And looking on eBay, these are not actually too expensive. They range from maybe $10 to $40 for the different engines you can get in the line. And out of the box right here, you can see there's this foam right here. And as you can see, the foam does look a little bit discolored, as does this wrapping or tissue paper, I guess you would call it. And that makes sense. Maybe a little bit of the paint of Bill has gotten off in the time he's been sealed up in here. So, as you can see, oh, wow. His color is not what I thought. It's a much more interesting and muted yellow. I thought it would be a brighter yellow, but actually that looks really, really nice. Okay, well, this is our first time together looking at this item. Let me just move that off to the side. I will keep that packaging. Maybe I'll put him back in the box. I don't really have any use for this guy, really. He's the first gold rail item I have. And if we look at him a little bit closer right here, you can see his eyes are looking off to his right, or should I say his left, our right. And you can see he has nice buffer detailing right there. And as I said, this is my first experience with a gold rail item. And now gold rail, from my understanding, was an attempt to bring over the golden rail items from Japan, of course, and they licensed it through ERTL. And if I believe this was only released over the course of 2 years, there wasn't really any other items after that. So I guess this was maybe a little bit of a failure for ERTL. Maybe they just didn't market it well. Who knows? And on the bottom right there, it says 1993. And I think this was in the first year of the item's release. And as I said, his face maybe does look a little bit weathered. I'm not sure if that's just the color of it, but it does look a little bit discolored. But I think this has actually never been opened because it does look very new. You can see there's no dust on it or marks or anything. The paint's very bright and, speaking of bright, whoa, the camera's really bright. Sorry about that. The paint's very bright and clear, and it's very shiny too. And this lever right here, I'm not sure if it actually works. We'll test it out in a second. But I think overall the proportions of Bill here are very nice. I'm not sure if he actually has this detailing of right here. You can see a suggestion of a side rod. Thinking back to it, I think probably he does. Well, actually, look, here's an illustration right here. I could just be looking at that. Okay. Okay, I lied. That he pretty accurate, except it's not yellow, but that is accurate to his actual model. So I stand corrected. I have a very poor memory, as you can see. Being exposed to Thomas Wooden Railway so much, there's never any detail like that. I just think of Bill and Ben having 4 wheels, so that's what I'm accustomed to at least. His funnel right there is nice detailing, and of course his nameplate and SCC, the Sodor China Clay Company, is on his side of his boiler right here. And he does have nice detailing of his bunker and his whistle picked out right there. It does look funny a little bit how his whistle is done, how it looks like there's just a big piece of coal like sticking out of his bunker. So that's kind of interesting. But besides that, I think that's enough about his design at least. And he is very heavy. He is made mostly of metal, except for this little plastic part right here and on the bottom right here. And his wheels, once again, are pretty big. They're actually pretty nice. And compared to an ERTL item, it is a fair amount different. I don't have any ERTL items on hand right now. I actually put those ones that I was taking a look at on my shelf right now. That's a little too far behind me. However, it is a very nice item. And as I said, in comparison to ERTL items, it is a fair amount different. And I think, honestly, it probably has more pros to it than cons compared to an ERTL item. as I've expressed, sometimes the ERTL items are weirdly proportioned, and I'm not necessarily that big a fan of them. Let's see if the magnets work. So maybe if I turn the lever like this, what did it say? Move lever to the right to connect. Okay, well, hopefully this... Okay, I think it works a little bit, right? And maybe this magnet is not strong enough, or maybe this one, who knows? It could be vice versa. Let's see on the back. Okay, so that's not connect. So I think the magnet works. You can feel a little bit of tension right there. Maybe it's not designed for this type of magnet, or as I said, maybe there's just something wrong with this magnet or this one, who knows. But for the $10 that I paid, I think I actually got a pretty good deal on this item, and it is very interesting to see a gold rail item in a store still. And once again, just as I mentioned earlier, way earlier, like probably 10 hours earlier in the video, just having an experience of finding a new in-box Thomas & Friends item from the 90s in a store near me was just a really great experience, and something I didn't really ever think would come to reality, come to fruition in my life. So that's a pretty cool thing. Also, I just want to mention that it's interesting to have a range so small like this, and also fairly affordable, all things considered. And maybe I'll make it my little goal to buy all these gold rail items. I know that, of course, they made Ben, Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, James, Percy. I'm not sure about Toby, maybe Toby, and I think a couple others, maybe someone like Birdie, or probably Harold. Harold's in every merchandise range. And maybe I'll make it my mission to collect these and complete a whole collection. Of course, with Thomas & Railway, it's a long-term goal, I should say, of collecting all the models ever made. That's going to be a pretty daunting task, especially with some more rare or obscure models. And the other ranges, maybe I have a couple take-alongs, a couple ERTLs. That will be a long journey too. But this could be a short-term, cool project to do. And who knows, maybe one day on the channel you'll see a complete collection, Wooden Railway Edwards complete collection of gold rail items. So, with that said, I think it's time to wrap up this video, and let's take a closing look at everything that we took a look at. As you can see, I really had to pull back and zoom out the camera for this shot, which encompasses all of what I purchased that day at the flea market, the rummage sale, the train store. And I guess I shouldn't say that, because to be honest with you, this is not all of what I purchased. There was some non-train related stuff that I bought that day that doesn't really thematically relate to this channel. However, even with this stuff right here, it still is a lot of stuff. And just doing quick calculations, I think probably about $100 I spent on all of this, which is not necessarily the best deal ever, but is still pretty great for all of what I got here. And honestly, just the memories and enjoyment from that experience topples any monetary value that I could have gotten this for. And it really just is great to see all this here and now have it in my collection, in my grasp, and something that I can say I own all of this cool stuff. And just going to all those different locations, the thrill of the hunt, not even necessarily buying all this stuff, but just hunting for it. And as I said, the experience of going to brick and mortar places to find stuff like this is getting harder and harder to find as the years goes on. So for my first experience, striking gold like I did right now with all this stuff is just really great. And hopefully I can have more experiences like that in the future. You can see Percy right there. I just noticed he's barely peeking on screen to the right corner right there. And that just goes to show just how much I got. You can see the Roam Around Thomas, the VHSs, the ERTL, new in box and used, that model train of that steam train over there, the gold rail Bill, I almost called him Ben, and the model train track, the figurines, the ERTL figurines, the model train buildings, and the rolling stock magazines, the construction kit of these right here, and it's just a lot of stuff, and a lot of diverse stuff too. And hopefully I can have, as I said, experiences like that again soon. I already have some other videos coming out of other purchases I've made, and I'm not exactly sure what I'll title this video. Maybe I'll make it a series, something like Flea Market Finds. I know that's kind of generic, but that just came to my head. Even though this probably isn't all from the flea market. Of course, this isn't, but I'm just talking about the future. Not everything I purchase in person is going to be from a flea market, but I think I'll reserve unboxing videos for stuff I get on places like eBay or Amazon, and I'll make this a series, something like Flea Market Finds, stuff I find on the hunt in person, and I think it'll be pretty cool and maybe spice up my channel a little bit. So expect more videos like that soon, and also big news about the 1K subscriber special. Over the course of this video, over the many days that I've made this, I think I've formulated a plan for what I want to make that video. Of course, I've hit 1K subscribers on YouTube, as I said, long ago, probably days and hours ago now, in the start of the video. It might take you a couple days to watch this whole thing, if you even do. But if you got to this point, I just want to mention that a video encompassing 1K subscribers and celebrating it a little bit will be coming out eventually. We'll see here. And I thought that might be a really nice celebration for 1,000 subscribers. So I just want to thank you all for making it to the end of this video. And even if you didn't, thank you for watching any part of this video. It really does mean a lot. And the next goal I want to get to is hopefully one day I'll get monetized and, you know, make a little money off this channel. Of course, all of these are my personal funds that I'm putting into this. I'm never going to ask for a Patreon or channel membership or anything like that, because that's not something even I personally would do for another creator. But even if I could make a little bit of pocket change on the side to fund this hobby, I think that would be pretty cool. And even if not, it's still great to make videos, and it is a nice outlet to get my creativity out there and show off some of my collection, because otherwise it's just sitting on a shelf, you know? So you might as well show it to people who also enjoy it. And without further ado, I think I'll end this video here, and I'll see you in many more videos. As I said, now that it's summer, hopefully I'll have a little bit more flexibility with making videos and having time to work on said videos. So thank you for watching this video for maybe the 4th time I've said that now, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.